No one could have anticipated the rise and sudden fall of North Korea, which plummeted the country into a state of economic crisis. Let's do a deep dive into the North Korean economy and uncover exactly how the once prosperous nation has sharply descended into poverty. In the years following the Korean War, North Korea was attempting to rebuild its nation from the ground up after their unsuccessful attempt at capturing its southern counterpart. With such severe damage to the country's infrastructure, the nation knew it needed a drastic change. In 1953, North Korea adapted to a newfound economic model called the centralized planned economy, which meant that only government bodies could make executive decisions. With heavy investments in steel, cement, and iron industries, accompanied by a focus on industrialization, North Korea began to recover from the repercussions of the war. This rebuild was supported by allies like the Soviet Union and China, who viewed North Korea's road to economic recovery as potential for growth and development. They saw North Korea as a critical player in the international race for industrialization, which was the sector that dominated North Korea's economy, and knew that by providing their assistance, they could reap the benefits later on through the expansion of their economic influence and access to resources. Not to mention, the two countries were in the midst of a massive power struggle due to the Cold War, and saw value in North Korea as a strategy to counterbalance US allyship in South Korea. It was also at this time that the president and founder of North Korea, Kim Il-sung, reminded his people of the three main principles in the country's nationalistic ideology of self-reliance, also known as Juche. This consisted of Jeju, which meant political independence, Jarip, which meant economic independence, and Jawi, which meant independence in defense. Although Juche was meant to re-establish North Korea as an independent nation and lower its reliance on supporting allies, it could be argued that it was these very principles that caused the country's oncoming downfall. But we're not there yet. Much to many surprise, the North Korean economy would bounce back faster than anticipated. In the 1970s, North Korea experienced an abrupt economic upturn. The country's economy was so successful that it was even outpacing its neighbour South Korea. In its best year, 1985, the per capita nominal GDP was at an astonishing $836. In Asia, the only other possible competitor for this rapid growth rate was China, but they didn't even reach $600 per capita until 1995, which was 10 years later. The rise of the North Korean economy could be attributed to its substantial advancement in the fashion and textiles industry, which was all due to the country's fast-paced industrialization. North Korea was still receiving support from allies, the Soviet Union and China, through the forms of financial assistance, the sharing of technological knowledge, and development aid, allowing industries such as energy, heavy, and mining to prosper. Another one of the country's most flourishing industries was fashion. With North Korea's unmatchable ability to imitate Western styles and mass export products throughout Asia, the nation became the leading source of Asian fashion. The North Korean economy also strategically pivoted its industrialization towards the exporting industry, knowing that their rapid technological advancement would prove to be highly profitable if utilized correctly. Foreign investment and trade were at an all-time high, primarily due to North Korea's ability to mass-produce high-quality consumer goods, textiles, and chemicals, which were highly valuable all around the globe. The country's capital, Pyongyang, grew to a population of over 3 million. The country also experienced a massive surge in urbanization, and with their capabilities of producing both Asian and Western-inspired products, North Korea was seemingly one of the strongest economies worldwide. Perhaps the most impressive advancements were the ones made in the military sector. North Korea had heavy military expenditure throughout their entire recovery and growth period. The military sector was highly prioritized in the nation's centralized planning economy, even to the point of halting the expansion of other industries, such as infrastructure, agriculture, education, and social welfare through the reallocation of necessary funding. Although this intense focus did contribute to the country's technological advancements, it was not enough to offset the lack of support for the more profitable industries that could have been utilized for export and trade. In 1984, North Korea donated 7,200 tons of rice, 550,000 yards of cloth, and 759 cases of medicine to South Korea, further strengthening its position as the more successful of the two divided states. However, all good things come to an end. And with just how rapidly North Korea was able to advance its economy and development, everything ultimately ended just as quickly. A few years later, the North Korean economy would take a drastic fall from grace and find itself on the brink of a complete collapse. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 was detrimental to North Korea, as they lost one of their primary sources of economic support, as well as their main supply of oil. By the early 1990s, North Korea was plagued with a countrywide famine and plummeting into poverty. The lack of electricity, combined with a series of hailstorms and floods, resulted in an estimated death toll of 1 million people, approximately 5% of the country's total population. In the mid-1990s, North Korea had to start accepting international and humanitarian aid in hopes of keeping its population alive. To this day, North Korea continues to receive aid. During this period of famine, many once prosperous industries had to be stripped down to nothing in an attempt to feed the population. Factories remained unoperated, the people remained hungry, and any and everything they had was given to the North Korean elite and the military. Even during this challenging time, North Korea continued to keep their attention and resources on their military personnel in hopes to maintain their loyalty and their patriotism. Meanwhile, the rest of the population was starving to death, with mass graves filling the empty streets. Many attempted to flee the country in hopes of surviving, but most never completed the journey. Those that did arrived in neighbouring nations like China with nothing but the tattered clothes on their back, desperate for any kind of life that wasn't the one they lived. The government's need to funnel all funding into the military sector would also be a contributing factor to their country's downfall. Not only were other previously prominent and profitable industries left entirely in the dust and neglected, but the emphasis on military weaponry provided windows of opportunity for corruption and illegal activities hidden under the category of government business. An increase in weapon smuggling, illicit arms exports, and other underground activities continued to damage their economy even further. On the other side of the border, the nation's southern counterpart was thriving. South Korea's per capita GDP skyrocketed in comparison. With their openness to international relations, trade, and other business opportunities, South Korea was able to dramatically increase its growth, led primarily by its expansive export industry. Despite accepting international assistance, North Korea still remained loyal to their Juche ideology, which continues to impose a barrier between them and globalization, international trade, and other economic advancements. Closed off but labeling it as self-reliant, North Korea remains separate from most of the world. With its restricted access to technology, information, and international markets, it comes as no surprise that the economy has remained stagnant and struggling. Their military sector, which has long since been the country's main priority, is more feared than it is admired. With threats of ballistic missile usage and nuclear warfare, especially in periods of high political tensions, North Korea's heavy investment in its military has resulted in its indirectly isolating itself from most of the world. As they continue to develop this sector, international sanctions have been imposed, and words of caution have been passed around due to North Korea's extensive arsenal of weaponry. To this day, North Korea's population remains in the shackles of poverty and malnutrition. Lack of change and development in their economic model has caused them to stay under-resourced and fall behind in modern times. Even now, China remains North Korea's primary ally, but some could say that this relationship could be classified as dependent, much to North Korea's dismay. The nation has maintained its centralized planned economy, stifling all prospects of innovation, creativity, and productivity due to a highly restrictive government that forbids challenging the established policies and norms. This lack of economic liberalization has turned the once promising North Korea into a nation lagging behind everyone else, with struggles of poverty and famine continuing to loom over the nation years later. Without the abolishment of the country's command economy, North Korea may remain in this state of crisis. If you liked learning about the economic history of North Korea and how the effects of the past shaped it into how it is today, you'll love our previous video, Why Africa is Still So Poor, all about the shocking economic reasons you didn't know that was keeping Africa poor.